Prime Minister. Here, here. We call on the Prime Minister to start the debate for us. Here, here.
Hello, am I clearly audible?
Hi, yes, we can hear you.
Can someone share a timer?
Hi, yes, we can hear you.
No, I'm saying, can someone share a timer?
Yeah, just a second, I'll do that. Is it visible?
Yes. Cool. Thank you so much, Keshav. Akshita Kumar going as the Prime Minister. Preferred pronouns she/her. Preferred mode of taking a POI would be via the chat, preferably after the 5th minute of my speech. We'll start in 30 seconds. Okay. Starting my speech on a self counter of 3, 2, 1, go. Universities as a whole, in order to operate, need funding to go ahead and operate in the first place, historically, as well as those that have been recently established, right? Which means that education in and of in itself is a dynamic concept where people opt into the institution seeing two things: A, educational opportunities; B, the capacity of the institution to go ahead and provide those opportunities, which then again stem from funding. We'll prove in this entire debate why this funding is likely to get affected, how it hampers the functioning of the institution as a whole, and how distancing from religious philosophy gives them the opportunity to go ahead and explore more funding options, right? But then, before that, it is imperative to go ahead and put it out there that most of these universities historically were set up in the past, and these universities were Christian convents or majorities in those particular regions, right? Now, why is it like more likely that they were more like majorities in those particular region is because the difference in the level of education between the majorities and the minorities, which means that people who were privileged enough to get access to education were the ones who wanted to propagate their religion in the first place, which is why they had the funds and capacity and incentive to go ahead and establish that particular university to go ahead and propagate that religious philosophy. So people of privilege had the opportunities and resources to go ahead and opt into it because of the limited amount of educated minorities and because of the limitations and restrictions posed upon the minorities to go ahead and access the same sort of religious learnings, given the sort of discrimination on the basis of class, ethnicity, and identity that was particularly over there. Which means that if we are locating the scenario of these religious orders and educational universities in the current scenario, then we need three things for characterization of this entire thing, right? Firstly, on the point of secularism, it is incredibly important to note that the state as a whole, or the governments and the functioning bodies of the state, are increasingly distancing themselves from religion to avoid any sort of association, both in terms of governmental functioning as well as education, right? Education and religion in today's world, in the globalized, liberalized world, is something that is considered as two separate topics, where sure, religious is considered for educational purposes, but not for propagatory methods as far as education is important, right? Which means that education at all points of time has to steer clear of the religious beliefs and has to take a secular approach to the philosophy of the world in order to understand the world in terms of education itself and not a limited worldview, right? Then that also means that they operate within these universities, then operate in today's world world within multicultural societies, unlike how it operated in the past, which clearly creates a binary between how these institutions operate today and the sort of cultural or ethnicities that they are surrounded with, right? Which means that there are diverse beliefs and there will be this sort of imposition, and the people who are studying within these universities will feel like they do not have enough educational opportunities in the first place and might feel alienated. Secondly, on the point of intellectual freedom, what happens is that these universities then force some sort of theological worldview, which is then what shapes their entire education. So a lot of people do not want to opt into that, which means at a point in time you're not having enough people come into your university, your funds are already limited, your reputation is something that is already limited, which hampers the functioning of the university as a whole, right? Because you shape the worldview in a view that views nature not in educational terms but rather in religious terms, right? Thirdly, on the point of accessibility, this entire thing limits accessibility as a whole, because now these people because now these universities as a whole can influence scholarship, etc., where students belonging to the same communities get benefit, and then it sort of creates an exclusionary terms for these universities to go ahead and operate on. Now all of this creates a problem for the funding in itself for these people, right? Because why is funding so important for these religious institutions? So that they subpart the religious philosophy integration into the curriculum and promote education in a neutral term and distance themselves, is because for all sorts of research opportunities, expensive infrastructure,
Yes, yes.
having like top after the fifth minute of the speech, and for having like top faculties, you will need funding, right? You will also need funding in case you are to ensure accessibility as it is in the globalized world, right? For all of these things you need funding. Now state on one hand is not willing to go ahead and associate with your institution in the first place, because they're forced to distance from them regarding your entire propaganda association that there is with this university, right? The funding from alumni is something that stays either ways, but a second way where you get your major funding from is from corporate sections, right? Now these corporate sections also do not want to go ahead and fund your universities in the first place because of the sort of ideology that you're associating yourself with, right? Which means that these corporates, even if there are some corporates who want to opt into your universities, you miss out on like a large amount of market that there is of these corporates institutions going ahead and funding your university. Which means that if you want to operate today in this today's multicultural world, you need to distance yourself actively from the religious philosophy that you're propagating into this educational environment. Before that, POI.
What do you think this
Because
religious integration
universities
looks
usually
like?
operate independently when they are not entitled for any funds coming from the states. How the state's funding going to affect in the status quo?
Okay, to answer the first POI, these religious affiliations look like these people going ahead and actively propagating religious philosophy and integrating into the curriculum as it is stated itself. We say that this is something that is not viable opportunity or like a viable solution to go ahead and do that if you want enough funding in the first place, which then means secondly onto your POI of state funding, because these universities then in order to function need funds from all places possible, right? I'm pointing out the possible funding allocations that there can be and why they do not want to opt in the first place, which is why that at a point in time all of your limited worldview or limited accessibility, etc., is something that is hampering your the outlook of your institution as a whole. These further institutions such as the state, such as these corporates sections will not be willing to fund you because you associate yourself with this in the first place. And funding is incredibly important if you want to make education as a whole of your university to be accessible in the first place, right? With those reasons, proud to propose.
We thank the Prime Minister for that fine speech. We welcome the leader of opposition here.
Hi, just give me a quick 30 seconds to done with my prep.
Sure.
Hi, am I audible?
Hi, yes, you're audible and you're visible. Thank you.
All right. Yanjoo, pronounce him, POI verbally. Playing my speech in 3, 2, 1. A university without its identity is just another institution. There's nothing different. A religious university were never meant to be ordinary when they were built to inspire, to challenge, and to shape the modern new leaders grounded in the faith and ethics given by the religion itself. You're stripping away the religion's philosophy doesn't modernize them. It erases what makes them exceptional, what makes them special, what makes them extraordinary in today's society. In opening oppositions, want to push to you two things. We tell you that this is the core identity of the universities, and it's unfair to do so. But secondly, we tell you that this is the core funding that the universities are getting from. You cannot rip away its identity. Therefore, it makes a fall towards the entire universities as a whole. Then, but before I enter the main argument, two layers of response going to dealing with the push coming from opening government. They tell us that one, why we shouldn't do so? Because state actively distance themselves from religious institution. Two direct response towards this argument. One, we tell you that this is factually untrue. Why? Because your Western countries love religions. They love Christianity. Especially your country looks like United States. Your country looks like Israel. They love religion. They love Christianity. Your Middle East country love religions. They love Islam. That's why your mosque, your church are fucking rich. They paid for donations. Even though they suffer, they still paid for the religions because they believe that this is where the faith go for, and they believe that as long as they donate, they will get a faith, and also protections by the God or by the religion itself. Structural reasons have been proven. But secondly, we thought that even though yes, your states actively distance themselves from religious institution, I mean it's okay in opening op, we tell you that it's fine because we tell you that they already have self-funding. What's the difference? What's the delta then? One, it's because that these universities are not eligible for state funding. Why? Because they're independent institutions that created because of the religious order of religious institutions. Then where they get the funding from? It looks like they get the funding from the religious institution itself, like your church, like your mosque. But the second thing is they actively receive donations from the people in the public, from the people on the ground. But also they actively receive the donations coming from the alumni to support the institution that they graduated from and support the institution of what makes them now today. But dealing with this really deal with the main push coming from opening government. But what's the framing that is required in today's debate that doesn't provided by opening government then? Three things. One, why religious orders create universities historically? Three things. One, religions oftentimes want to spread their words to the people. Therefore, the best way to do so is through education because people actually actively listen to what you try to preach to them. But the second thing is it's a kind of support structure for people who believe in them to able to get a source and also to exclusive exposure to whatever informations that they are interested in. Especially in universities, what they are providing differently compared to a church, compared to a mosque, is we are able to provide you a research pathway in specific religious studies, like looks like your Bible studies and also your Islam studies. This is the delta then. But the third thing is they have the religious causes on the words of religions, which make you a better believer into a religion itself. And this is also the way for you to build up your personality then. The second thing is, what is the best interest of the university? It looks like A, you want to continue doing this thing, which is the religious studies. But the second thing is when they want to do more research and development in the universities itself to make their religions greater and more understanding and also to preach their religions to other people. But the second layer of analysis is why does integrating the religious philosophy looks like? It looks like one, the operations of the universities are completely different, which means that you might have designated time for students to pray when you're in Islamic studies. The second thing is you might build church in your campus. But the third thing is that you might have religious society in your universities then. And the second thing is we provide students scholarships to when they are eligible and when they choose to enter into the religious study subject. It looks like some of the university looks like MCKL in Malaysia, right? They will have will give students scholarship if you take their religious subject. But what does actively distance looks like? It just simply looks like you take away the religious courses and also your religious belief practice in universities then. But the delta then is we still have normal courses like your law, like your medicines in our normal universities classes, which makes them completely different with others, which is the only that they will have some religious subject and also religious practice in their universities then. Argument one coming from opening oppositions, core identity of universities. The premise that fall under this argument and the idea behind is there's a lot of universities. It looks like your Harvard, your Yale universities. But then in the current status quo, every universities are looking for something exclusive and something different that they can give students. This act as a selling point to the students so that it attract the student to enter the universities. And this is beneficial. Why? Because the process of distancing themselves make these universities hard to compete with the mainstream universities like Harvard and Yale universities because you are affiliating away from your core identity. What makes you different then with the mainstream universities, and why I have to choose religious universities when you have nothing different compared to the mainstream top universities like Yale, like Harvard, like Oxford? Then why this is true? This is true simply because the religious universities were explicitly founded with religious missions, and many of these institutions are legally affiliated with religious order and have built their reputations based on the faith-based educations. It looks like historical example shows that religious universities distance themselves from origin, they lose their religion's character entirely. Why this is good? This is good because of three reasons. One, it keeps religious philosophy and keeping religious philosophy ensures that these universities stay distinct from secular institutions. It acts as attracting students who seek for value-based educations. But second, it fosters a strong sense of community through shared traditions, ethics, and mission-driven educations. But the third thing is it encourages a holistic education. It don't only focus on academics, but the character and moral reasons behind of it. This is important. This is important because of two main reasons. It's because if the universities abandon the religious route, these then become a generic institutions. When you're competing with thousands of others university instead of using a unique education model, it makes you fail as an religious institution universities. But second is many donors and also alumni and also faculty support the institution specifically because of its faith-based values. If you secularize it, it could lead to a funding and enrollment decline. This leads me to my second extension about how practical benefits when you no longer receive donor support and also long-term stability. This then looks like the funding are able to help them to research and also do religious studies. It looks like many religious universities receive major funding from the religious organization and alumni who value faith-based education. This is important because you no longer push for religious-based studies, which means that your alumni itself will stop funding you and you will stop getting donor support to continue your education. This is important because if you don't do so, your universities fall. I don't see what's the pathway for your universities to continue. Three impacts that we proved to you in today's debate. Removing institutions' religious identity could cause a financial stability, but secondly, removing the identity showing that integrating faith doesn't hinder academic excellence, but it maintains the high ranking, well-being, and Catholic identity. This is important in today's debate. Therefore, the ballots go to opening oppositions. With that, oppose.
Thank the leader of opposition for that fine speech. We welcome the Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I be seen and heard?
Hi, yes, we can see and hear you.
Cool. Keshav going as DPM. For the POS, you can just put it through the chat. I'll take closing. I won't be taking opening. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. I have two problems with the entire aspect of funding that you get from opening opposition in this debate. Notice that one, currently all the religious institutions, due to the rise within the liberalistic movements that have been existing within the global West, is something that is dwindling, which means that people are actively going and shifting away from religion and people are actively straying away from religion. They're trying to go and move away from religion because they want to go and explore other identities that exist for them, which means to say, when all of this becomes true, states also know that identity politics, especially within the Western spheres of this world, is not getting them anything. So they're also shifting towards policy politics, etc., etc. The impact of all of this is simple, that the amount of funding that is made available to religion is something that is completely dying out. But then the second thing under this is then that where do these religions now try to go and fund themselves from? Note that core believers of this religion are not believers of this religion are sure going and funding these religions at a particular point in time. But the second method through which all of these religions try to go and get this funding is particularly the reverse of whatever opening opposition going claims in the first place, which means that the profit from these universities that were historically backed out by these religious institutions are now used to go and further fund these religions, which means that you are giving more and more profit to this religion so that they can go and sustain their influence, so that they can just sustain their conservative ideals that have existed in the society historically. So then, the first thing I'm going to prove in my speech then looks like why on our side of the case, why on our side of the paradigm, you're able to go and have a much more better institutions, not just for students, but also for teachers. First thing under this, notice that self-censorship and ideological homogeneity literally goes and kills academic freedom and intellectual rigor that can exist within these institutions. How? One, students and faculty literally going to fear challenging
PY.
religious doctrine later, even if alternative perspectives are backed by scientific and historical evidence. Two, universities that remain affiliated with religion tend to go and restrict research topics, limit faculty hiring, and censor student activism on controversial issues like reproductive rights, LGBTQ identities, etc., etc. Three, this creates an echo chamber where dissenting views are suppressed, that is preventing intellectual progress in all of these universities. The second mechanism under this is how you go and control faculty and you control your curriculum design. Because one, religious oversight affects who gets hired and what gets taught at all points in time. This looks like in religiously affected affiliation.
Keshav, you have muted yourself.
Yeah, the host muted me. I think I was on 220. So I'll just continue. 3, 2, 1, go. You go and control faculty and religious continuum, because which means that religious oversight affects who gets hired and what gets taught within these institutions. Which means in religiously affiliated institutions, theology often goes and influences subjects beyond religious studies, affecting how philosophy, ethics, and even sciences are like to go and frame that outcome. What this does is that this leads to a biased education where entire fields such as evolutionary biology, gender studies, or comparative religion are either altered or absent due to conflicts with religious doctrines at all points in time. This looks like how in Catholic universities in US have banned distribution of contraceptives despite their medical and social importance due to adherence to Catholic doctrine. This also looks like a Jesuit university and theological influence and still mandate theology courses that reinforce Catholic ideology that is limiting space for students of other faiths or secular beliefs at all points in time. The impacts of all of this are threefold. One, the impacts of all of this on Gov then are threefold. One, when you go and actively shift away from religious institutions, you increase epistemic diversity by allowing multiple viewpoints to be discussed without fear of religious censorship. Two, this encourages innovation and scientific progress as research is no longer bound by faith-based constraints. Three, you prevent ideological stagnation, ensuring that universities remain space for genuine intellectual debate rather than dogmatic enforcement. But then the fourth thing that you get from this is that just more and more students are able to now opt into all of these universities. And when more and more students opt into all of these universities, that really going to increase the amount of funding that you can get at all points in time later. And I think that is particularly crucial because the reason why Harvard, MIT, Stanford, all of these universities get all this huge amount of opt-in from a diverse set of people is just because these people are able to get it's just because you are secular and you do not go and promote one religious doctrine. And if opening opposition's claim now is that you're able to go and protect this religious identity that this university has had historically, I don't think that this is important as long as you're able to go and sustain yourselves. But then the second thing I'm going to go and push is why modern students and faculty prioritize open and inclusive environments. Note that one, in an increasingly secular and multicultural world, many students and researchers do not want to be bound by religious affiliations, which looks like two, students from non-Christian or non-religious backgrounds feel excluded of fear and a fear that they will be pressured into religious participation in certain academic spaces, which also looks like three, faculties choose to go and work elsewhere rather than place limitations on their teaching and research due to religious interference, which also looks like how funding and international research collaboration is now limited because government NGOs and research bodies prefer funding institutions that follow secular evidence-based approaches rather than those that incorporate religious biases, which looks like religious institutions face reduced grant eligibility, particularly for scientific research, because religious priorities limit funding opportunities at all points in time. What also this does is that religious universities lose out on global rankings, which looks like universities that prioritize secularism and intellectual freedom are more likely to attract global partnerships, high-profile faculty, and top students. Those that are tied to religious doctrines risk falling behind, as seen in the ranking of highly secular institutions like Harvard, MIT, Oxford versus religious institutions at all points in time. But then, let us talk about funding better. One, companies and states avoid the optics of religious affiliations. Three reasons for that. One, modern companies prioritize neutral branding and inclusivity because companies increasingly adopt secular, inclusive, and neutral branding to appeal to a diverse consumer and employee base, which looks like sponsoring a university which looks like when you sponsor a university with strong religious ties, this can be seen as an endorsement of particular faith, which alienates your customers, employees, and investors from a different religious background or secular backgrounds. Second, states have strict policies against favoring religious institutions because many governments, especially in Western liberal democracies, operate on the principle of secular governments, means public funds cannot be seen as directly supporting one religious ideologies. Universities with strong religious affiliation now struggle to go in secure public research grants, infrastructure funding, and education subsidies because funding them may spark challenges or public backlash. This also looks like corporate fund sponsorship and research grants are directly affected because many STEM-based industries, tech firms, and healthcare companies prefer to fund the universities that are focused on more empirical and data-driven researchers and data-driven universities. If a university's religious affiliation leads to restriction of certain topics like stem cell research, gender studies, climate science, companies will redirect funding to institutions without ideological limitations, etc., etc. But then also, let's talk about, what are the impacts of all of this? One, on our side, you get more funding because companies are more willing to donate, fund research, and create industry partnerships with secular universities. States feel less pressure to go and justify their funding, that is allowing universities to access larger grants without political controversy. Two, you have long-term financial stability for the university because a shift from religious funding ensures that universities do not collapse to dwindling church donations, which means by securing multiple diverse revenue streams, including state funding, corporate sponsorship, and private research grants, the universities become more sustainable. But also you get higher global rankings because universities that receive more funding can invest in better faculty, research facilities, and student programs that is increasing their global rankings and appeal. This attracts more international students and top-tier researchers, creating a positive feedback loop of success. For all those reasons, propose.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech. We welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
I just want to check if I'm audible and clear.
Hi, yes, you're audible.
All right, sure. Just give me a few seconds and I'll get started. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The problem with opening government is that they assume that religions are inherently malevolent actors and have been shunned out by society at large. Here's how I'm going to disprove this, and I'm going to explain to you why this is something that's very much so niche by nature and something that people have the capacity to opt in and out of, which is going to largely undercut a lot of the harms that they want to talk about. First line of response is I want to deal with funding. They tell you that states are inherently delineating away from perhaps religious narratives and religious institutions. Few reasons to explain to you why, across multiple contexts, states, even in your most liberal societies, still give accommodations and luxuries towards religious institutions and just religion as a doctrine as a whole. One, in non-secular states, religions are often given constitutional power within how in which these countries are governed. This shows that there's an acceptance for religion or some level of respect towards how religions operates. But even in another context, even in secular states, religions are oftentimes given things like tax exemptions, certain funding subsidies, and etc. These are all mechanisms that I'm proving to you across multiple contexts that disprove their context to tell you that religions are something that have no inherent value within society in that of itself, in terms of education and in terms of the institutions that it operates by. What does this prove? This proves A, Yanjoo's context to tell you that even if they want to argue that there's no funding for religions, I'm disproving this context by telling you that because there is a level of accommodation by the state towards religious institutions, funding is still something that's present for the state. But secondarily, because of the fact that these forms of institutions are a significant minority in the status quo, which is oftentimes filled with private, like super liberal-ish universities that are oftentimes not lineating towards religion, it means that the extent of funding that these unis need to sustain itself is also something that's significantly lesser. Yanjoo gives you alternative mechanisms aside from states, such as communities and religious like institutions who are able to actively fund this also. We don't think funding is a big issue in this debate. But second thing then I want to take take note of, which is the malevolence of religion. I've already proven to you that there's so many communities, even in your most liberal societies, that inherently pose a value upon religion. These are things that they're oftentimes raised with, right? Because religion is to some extent an embodiment of culture, because these two things are to some extent interrelated. For them to make a rather assertive claim that just because society is liberalizing, there is an inherent displacement away from religion, doesn't necessarily mean there's no inherent desire for people to be educated or to understand the doctrines of which the foundations of their religions are built on. A few questions in my speech. First of all, on the principle of the inherent value of religions, of these institutions because of a historical context. Note that these have always been platforms and places for people to raise religious awareness. Unique forms of educations were provided, unique courses, things like perhaps curated religious studies that are only exclusively found within these institutions. Government need to defend a world where they deviate away from this and take away these forms of courses, take away these forms of opportunities for education for those that they want to, by offering your more conventional courses, like your things like perhaps your most like conventional stuff that isn't actually these things in the first place. The unique thing that these institutions were able to give and still do is the fact that they give students things like scholarships. They provide them niche opportunities for education if these students choose to not opt into your conventional forms of study. Why is this not exactly harmful? Because no judge that this is still a choice within this debate, because insofar as someone who's not affiliated with religion can always choose to opt into the myriad of other institutions that exist in this world if they do not feel like curating themselves to these particular courses of study. This means that all of their harms of people being indoctrinated, forced into religion, are all unlikely to manifest when Yanjoo gives you context that in status quo, you have millions and millions of private institutions like Sunway, like public unis like Harvard. These are all alternatives that people who do not feel an affiliation to religion can opt into. I'm unclear as to why this indoctrination is as severe as opening government wants to tell you. But secondarily, why is deviating away so problematic against the fundamental purpose of the university? We already explained to you, there's large levels of competition within this market. There's large levels of universities who have established faculties across multiple different areas. The very unique point of which you had, which was these curated niche things that you offer, are now something that you're going to deviate away from and start again from scratch. This is problematic because as the average reasonable student, am I rather going to go into Harvard, who has a 500-year-old like law faculty, or am I going to go into the Catholic Church Methodist School, who has now become less Methodist and is offering me a law course that has existed for like 2 years? The comparative here is the level of monopolies that exist in the market makes the need for the universities to stay relevant something that's important insofar as they're able to preserve this. Absent a government mechanization to prove a meaningful impact as to why they're able to get some benefit for these institutions and for the articulator. I don't have to give you one. Like for the students, is something that they haven't proven. They've only asserted to you indoctrination, which I've disproved through variety of contexts and variety of outlets. But thirdly then, what is integration through our model able to give you? One, we are exclusively going to be able to give you niche forms of education. It is our side exclusively that encourages religious discourse when we have courses like perhaps religious studies and Islamic studies, where we encourage intellectuals of religion to come together to discuss and to liberalize and to compare concepts and to justify them. On government bench, the point in which they deviate away from this is the point in which they acknowledge that religion is not something that should be talked about. Why is this problematic? Because this goes against fundamental liberal values, because they stuff it under the rug. These are things that exacerbate the religious like radicalism and etc. On our side, we give people the best platform through education to carry out religious discourse, to engage with ideas, to compare, and to in this sense, this also largely then undercuts all of their harms that they want to talk about indoctrination, because we give you an outlet. But why is this also then beneficial from an educational standpoint? We provide students or people who have a niche interest in these subjects to opt into things like religious studies. Why is this relevant? Because no judge that religious studies are things that are historically very relevant in that of itself. Why is this so? Because there's years and years of historical references towards religious developments and how these things affected communities. The point in which government chooses to abandon this thing is the point in which they stunt the development of this intellectual subject, the point in which they stop the flow and development. On our side, we incentivize students by providing them things like scholarship, with the crux of religion being something as a buy-in factor. So it is a reason to continue these forms of intellectual discourse. We think that's a unique benefit opening opposition claims, because we're the only side that's able to further the development of an intellectual study in the form of religious. It's past 6. Lastly then, impacts, right? 3 impacts we're able to give you in this debate. 1, we're the only side that's able to provide you a a niche outlet for students to access education in a field that they potentially could particularly be interested in, right? Why is this then important and weighs over their benefit? Because we explained to you the diversity of outcomes. It's something that caters to students who are particularly interested in these things. If you're not, we're not going to force you to join a Catholic school if you don't want to, go to Sunway University if you want. But secondarily, we also give opportunities to your ostracized minorities who perhaps could not have the opportunities to get into places like Harvard. They find something that's more proximate, more meaningful to them to opt into these things. We protect the value of religious discourse and we protect the value of the development of these things. But thirdly, then we also then provide the opportunities to liberalize and to also engage in forms of discourse. We think these are three exclusive impacts that beat us over OG because their case hinges on funding and also making and malevolency of religion, which are two contexts I've disproved within the first 2 minutes of my speech. For all those reasons, this is OO and top half.
We thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for the council to welcome the member of government to study debates in the quiz. Wow.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Okay, I think I am. I would prefer POIs in the chat. Thank you. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Dear panel, universities should be safe and not damaging for the students. First, let's talk about who goes to such universities we have already discussed. We strongly believe that religious parents are the main motive to send someone to such places. No one would choose a religious institution over Harvard or Oxford or any decent university. We would say that it's purely because of the motivation of the group around the person or the parents specifically. Why so? Because parents view other universities as sinful. They don't want their children to be sent to those places where they will be condemned or there will be a lot of sin around them. They want their kids to go to heaven, to be with God, and so on. That's the main reason why those universities have a lot of students who come. It's important to notice that those are children. They're 18, 19 years old who haven't decided on what's good, what's wrong. We believe that even if you choose to go to this university, you do it because of the necessity, not because you want to go to there. Okay, so what's the problem? Later. So what's the problem? We argue that people are trapped in those oppressive surroundings in the most vulnerable time of their life, their youth. So let's begin with why they are so vulnerable. First of all, they just left their hometown, their village, their apartment with their parents. They know nothing about life. They have no friends, no connections. They come to this new place with new ideas and new people. They feel lost, and only thing they can base their identity, their new life, is the thing that has been taught to them by university, by their parents, and this is religion, this is faith, this is like the base for their future identity. And most of the time, it's fine, it's okay, it aligns with their motives, but we will talk about two specific groups which are very vulnerable and we would like to defend in this motion. Those are people who lose their faith, and that's the majority of young people who come to university. And second, it's like groups like LGBT plus people. Let's begin with people who lose faith. Why do they lose faith when they come to university? How so it happens then in those religious surroundings they somehow lose faith? First of all, they get access to internet, to books. They are no longer surrounded by their parents, their community. They just see a fresh new start, a fresh new world. It happens that sometimes they go outside of the university to the local, cafeteria and see some pretty girls, some pretty boys, and start discovering and exploring themselves. They don't have this constant reinforcement that happened with their parents about religion. So it's obvious that people will think about new things. They'll lose their religious connection. Secondly, they are they think critically all the time. Even in the most religious university, you are taught to think critically in STEM subjects and so on. So it's obvious to us that at some point of their education, of be it 3 or 5 years, they will lose their faith, most likely. And even if not all of them, then some decent amount. Secondly, there are some people like LGBT people who just hid their true identity from their community, from their parents, who were from the start and free, but they still decided to go to this university. They are basically captured by these situations. They cannot change anything about them. I'll take POI, please, from OO.
Indoctrination is symmetric because in both worlds, your parents are probably going to indoctrinate you to join like a medical course or a law course. Even if it were to happen in religion, this is something that still happens in both worlds. Engage.
I think my second speaker will engage, but I'll provide some answers in my speech. Okay, so let's talk about how do those people suffer. How do people suffer from religious indoctrination? First of all, this indoctrination happens in a subtle way. We don't agree with the speakers that it's some harsh. No, it's very subtle and it comes in a small portions. How does it happen? First, people are caged in those communities. Why they are caged? Why can't they just escape or, I don't know, go somewhere else? First of all, they have expectations from their parents, from themselves. They want to succeed in life. They want to get a job. Maybe they already paid the tuition. They cannot leave this building, this university. Second, they are afraid. They are afraid to lose the expectation that somebody brought to them. They think of themselves as capable. They want to finish their education as everybody does, so they can just leave. Second, they suffer because they feel that they are constantly shaped in the way they don't want. They don't feel right. They feel that somebody is forging them with this religious hammer in a small but constant ways. How does it happen? In their curriculum, they always learn about religious philosophy. What's wrong? What's bad? They are taught that at Sundays they need to go to pray, and even if it's not in the curriculum, in the most liberal of those universities, we say that extra curriculum is very crucial because their friends go to those praying places, because their friends pray before food, because there are all those rituals that reinforce this religious mindset. And they can do nothing about this because they don't want to lose this base, this community they just got. They need new friends. They need to be good pals with professors, to get good grades, to success in life, because university is the future, is the base for the future, because they won't get a good salary, a good job, succeed in life without this degree. So we believe that it's terrible for them. They are in constant fear of being found out. This is existential fear of being excommunicated because they don't fit in, because they have lost their faith, because they are different, because they're part of LGBT, let's say. They don't want to lose their friends, but they constantly fear that it will happen. They don't want they cannot express themselves. They cannot express their sexuality, their true thoughts. They think about all the time about telling someone, but there's no one they can find. In our world, however, we think that there are multiple tools to achieve this, being it atheist professors, support groups like LGBT groups, open-minded students who are not from religious background, and so on. Thank you so much.
We thank the member of government for that fine speech. We welcome member of opposition. Here.
Yeah, just confirming if I'm clearly audible and visible now.
Yes, you are.
Great. POI is through voice. I'm not looking at chat. My mother is a chemistry teacher who believes all humans were made from sand, but she continues to teach about Bohr's atomic model in her school. People can separate religious ideas. OG has two things. One, ideological stagnation and the formation of echo chambers, and two, scientific innovation stops. Notice ideological stagnation is symmetric. Probably the people who go to this university are already deeply religious and have been indoctrinated by their parents already. Otherwise, they would have opted for like other secular universities which exist. But students who aren't super religious always have secular universities to go to. I don't know why they choose this one. They don't show a typical flipping point as to why the inaccess to this particular institution by people of other religions is something which we should care about. Why can't other education suffice? But secondly, on scientific innovation, this is so fucking symmetric. Having a mosque inside your campus and providing iftar during Ramadan doesn't mean you can't research on biochemistry. I don't see the link between the two. I don't see how religious practices lead to less scientific innovation. It is just an impact which Keshav tries to tell you. But quickly flipping funding, I think churches, alumni, philanthropists still exist. Corporates also have an incentive to do this for their PR or whatever the fuck. Lastly, even if we concede funding, I think the impacts which we are going to run are much more important. There are two extensions. One, there exists a market for these schools who want them to reintegrate. Anybody who doesn't want this always have the option to go to a secular school. They continue to exist. But the people who want to go here and want this reintegration won't have a choice left if this school distances itself. Many students come from deeply religious families and communities where faith is a core aspect of their identity. Their primary and secondary education have been faith-based, meaning that they see religious university as a natural extension of their learning. They often believe that faith and education are interconnected. They don't just want an academic degree, but an education that also strengthens their value and aligns with their beliefs. But some students explicitly want a career where faith plays a role, like things like priests, pastors, theologians, religious educators, or even policymakers which are informed by religious ethics. They see these universities as places to prepare them for these roles, offering not just secular knowledge, but also theological training that integrates their beliefs into their professional development. What happens to these people on Gov? The vast majority of top-tier universities have either no religious influence or only symbolic affiliations. If historically religious institutions also distance themselves, it leaves no serious academic institution that still integrates faith. This means that these religious students are forced to compromise. They either accept an education that erases their beliefs or they settle for a lower tier religious college. Why is this super bad? Because it forces students to compromise on their identity or their education. If they choose a secular school, they feel like they're constantly fighting for legitimacy in academic spaces that dismiss religious perspective. And if they choose a lower tier religious school, they miss out on career opportunities, networking, a high quality education. This creates a systemic disadvantage for religious students because they either sacrifice their faith or their future prospects. I don't think any house engages with these people existing, these people being important because we want to care about these people. These are still people who want an education. These are still people who deserve an education. Note the comparative on Gov is that the people who don't want this particular religious school to exist always have an alternative, but these particular religious students who deeply want to go to a school or deeply want to go to a religious university that aligns with their beliefs are left fucked over. If I'm a Muslim parent who wants to send my children to Aligarh Muslim University in India and that also now becomes secular, I probably don't send him to college because I probably feel like this is too secular for him in and of itself, which means these people who are inherently going to be fucked on their side of the house have no way of reversing this, have no recourse. But a second extension is on how you preserve religious intellectuality and cultural legacy. Before I move on, sure.
Your university has educational environment being instilled with religious philosophies, which means when I'm studying medical, I'm probably understanding what Allah wanted to go and do when he was pumping blood in human heart, which means I'm not understanding what actual science is because of all of this.
Bro, they still tell you there exists an aorta in the heart. They still tell you there exists a ventricle or auricle or whatever the fuck exists. I don't think just because you believe in a particular religion means you can't believe in scientific innovation. The physics department in AMU is not telling you that Big Bang Theory never happened. I think there's still research on this. My first piece of analysis already proves this. I don't think religious institutions or places of universities are so stupid that they don't focus on science at all, because then it wouldn't have been a university. It would have just been a temple or a mosque. But secondly, on why preserving religious, intellectual, and cultural legacy is something which is super important, because religious universities are the primary institutions for sustaining religious thought. Many religious traditions rely not only on places of worship, but also on academic institutions to continue developing their theological, philosophical, and ethical thought. Religious universities serve as centers of high learning where faith is examined critically, interpreted for modern times, and then passed down to future generations. If these institutions secularize, there are very few alternative spaces left where deep religious intellectual inquiry can actually thrive. The church alone cannot sustain intellectual development. Places of worship focus on faith practice, rituals, pastoral care. They do not provide the same level of academic theological debate, interdisciplinary dialogue, and research that universities do. Historically, Christian thought flourished in institutions like Jesuit universities. Islamic scholarship thrived in Al-Azhar. Jewish thought developed through yeshivas and university programs. If religious universities distance from faith, religious thought is left without serious intellectual grounding, which leads to stagnation and an eventual decline. But secondly, because religious identity in a secular world needs institutions institutional support. In an increasingly secular society, many religious communities struggle to retain younger generations who grow up in secular educational environments. Universities provide a space where religions can evolve, defend themselves against criticism, and engage in modern debate rather than being seen as simply outdated. If these universities abandon the religious roots, religion risks becoming an outdated ideology rather than an evolving intellectual and cultural force. I think all houses agree that we should care about religion because it gives catharsis to people. I don't think OpVip can say that religions are something which is super bad. But lastly, on loss of representation in higher academia means you have a loss of influence. Universities are power centers for shaping public policy, social norms, and intellectual discourse. What happens in a very top tier university within a country probably gains traction by the media houses within that country, probably gains traction by the policymakers. Religious universities provide representation for faith-based perspectives in these discussions. Without them, secular worldviews dominate by default. For example, Christian thought on social justice, Islamic views on finance, Jewish perspective on ethics have all been shaped because of university scholarship. If religious universities are not active participants, they lose their seat at the table in shaping society. Universities are the only place with the capacity to defend religion and co-opt it into this world. Jesuit universities have worked with the UN and the World Bank to create development policies that merge faith-based social justice with economic pragmatism. I think insofar as we give you two final impacts, which is that one, students who are deeply religious are left disenfranchised under their side of the house, but a positive push as to how the existence of these particular universities and them reintegrating religious philosophy back means that it's good for the religion in and of itself in a longer run because they're able to reintegrate and co-opt back into society. And this is like, I just want to weigh this impact on scale and on likelihood. I think just on scale, the number of people who are going to be religious and get disenfranchised under their side of the house is very, very huge, which means this is a harm which you can't ignore. But secondly, on likelihood, these people are not likely to get education otherwise, or they're not likely to be able to like respect the religious beliefs otherwise because they don't have alternative places to go. Notice that everything which they want to posit is simply mitigated by the existence of secular universities as well under our side of the house. We harm an exclusive stakeholder. We benefit an exclusive stakeholder, which is otherwise harmed under their side of the house. You can't like protect religion, vote CO.
We thank the opposition member for that fine speech. We welcome the government speech in the debate of the government speech. Hear, hear.
You can hear me, right? Yes, you can.
Yes, we can see and hear you.
For my speech, my pronouns are he, him, and I would like POIs in the chat, please. Yes, so put up the timer and start. Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. First of all, I want to clear up the framing. There are a lot of religious universities, some more religious, some less. Our impacts work on those that are totally religious, and there are a lot of them. For example, BYU in the USA, the Mormon University. There are a lot of Catholic universities and so on. So these exist, and our impacts work on that. So now I will analyze this motion. This motion reads as this house should. So what does it mean, the should word? Should does not mean that it's in the interest of the universities. For example, if the motion is this house believes that cops should not shoot black people without a reason, it doesn't mean that it's in the interest of the cops. It means it's the right thing to do. The world would be better in that way. In the WUDC manual, this house should means that we watch from neutral observer. And from a neutral observer, we see the grave emotional harm that we deal on these people. And that's why these universities should protect them in that way. So I'll bring in 3 points of comparison. First of all is comparing how good universities are versus the emotional pain that people suffer. So first of all, the opening opposition did not clarify what these core values actually do. We don't see the link between core values and academic excellency. But at the same time, we don't see what is the meaningful difference between the university on like 5,000 rank versus university like 5,000 rank and 10, for example. There is just no delta here at all. And if
And that's the first thing. The second thing is that these universities are not exceptional in the first place. There are a lot of universities in the world, and you talk just about the exceptional ones. We talk about all universities in the world. A lot of them are extremely religious. So, yes, and we think that emotional pain is much more important than some arbitrary stats. If you think otherwise, I won't just judge to say some LGBT person in the face that yes, you have to suffer. That's okay because our university is like 10% better. You can never justify this with some arbitrary stats because it's a real emotional pain that people suffer. Second of all, there are some ways in which religious people will be harmed because they will have less opportunities. But we think in this debate, atheist people and LGBT folk are intrinsically more important. Why? Well, it's about freedom. Religious people, they have their freedom. Even in the most secular universities, they have their extracurricular things they go to. They still have the churches. Their rights are later. Their rights are not bad. But atheist and LGBT people in extreme religious circumstances, they have no freedom because if they express their values, they are suddenly ostracized from their communities, they're removed from friends, and this is why they are more important in this debate. PY.
We agree with you. Freedom is something that everyone has a right to. This is why your LGBTQ student can just not go to our religious school and go to one of the multiple million other schools that are not religiously based.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to talk about this exact point because you turned a blind eye on our whole point about pressure from your parents. If you think that you are not religious, you cannot say to your parents, look, I'm not religious because you're afraid, you doubt yourself, because you respect them, because they love you. It's very hard to go against this family pressure. And it's the religious parents who will stop loving you and stop being in your family if you say that. They make you go to this university. Whatever you think, there are a lot of people that feel that way, that cannot do anything at all. And that's why we have to protect them because they have no other choice. And that's another thing. We are exclusive in that way because these people have no other avenues. And we help solve this problem. As my teammate said, every single thing that we add to these universities helps them. If we introduce just one atheist professor, they have just somebody to talk to. If they are in the LGBT community, they now have this LGBT support group that was banned before. And these universities are often extremely religious. For example, in BYU, you are you cannot be in the BYU if you're not in the Mormon church. Boys cannot go to girls' room, and so on, so on. You have like these moral checks, and it invades every single part of your life. And so now another point of comparison is that yes, we take away some opportunities for people in religion, but the key comparison is that we make less opportunities for religious people, but on your side, people that are in LGBT and atheists, they have no opportunities at all. And so even if like half of the opportunities of the scholarships would be down, well, now these people that feel this deep emotional pain on every day, every second when they talk to the friends, now they will have something. And this is why we win as well. And so now, opening composition also asked about like pressure from parents to be lawyers, to be doctors. Yes, we agree there are a lot of bad things in the world, but exclusive thing to religion is that it touches on who you are as a person and on all your friends, and that's what makes it as harmful as it can. And also, we don't see the value in religion as it is. We are brave enough to admit that religion sometimes is very bad. Like in Bible, there is a guide of how to sell slaves. It's extremely anti-LGBT, especially in these most religious universities. And we believe that each time that they step back away from these extremities, it's a good thing for the people that are forced into these circumstances because they don't have any other choice. And that's why we win this debate, is that we think that they should do this because in other way that people suffer really hard, and there are a lot of even suicides of people who every single friend, every single person that they talk to, they are afraid to betray them, they are afraid to be something less, so they just choose another way out. And we think that it's horrible, and there are ways to solve it by atheist professor, by support groups, or by making it okay, by providing some opportunities that religious people have in the secular universities, but secular people don't have in religion universities. Thank you so much.
In some of the government's work for that kind of speech, we call on opposition with closer debates for us. Here.
Just give me 30 seconds. I'll come back from the washroom.
Okay.
Cool. I'm back. Atharvu going away. I'll take POIs on the 5th. Please ask me a POI. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The point at which we are the only house within this debate that has the ability to engage with the most important metric in this debate, that is mobility for these religions and their ability to improve over time. And secondly, for the ability of the most vulnerable people, that are these people that have strict religious views, to go ahead and engage in education. We win this debate. We have three constructives that win us this debate. Firstly, we tell you why there is a better ability for these people to go ahead and engage in education, and why that ensures more mobility for the religion at large. But secondly, we tell you religions only get, or like these religions that set up these universities only have a platform to engage in discussions or to engage in their own ideas, the point at which these universities exist. But thirdly, we also tell you why the principle of religious freedom is so important within this debate, and why it is like debate winning in and of itself. Quickly dealing with OG, I think their only positive push is why there's lesser funding. Note, like, I have several responses to this. Firstly, like, their entire frame is based on the idea that, like, the governments are going to be, like, very liberal and not going to, like, fund this. Note, this is, like, very wrong. But like, O does disprove it, but we disprove it much better for two reasons. A, we tell you that there are USPs that exist in our paradigm which don't exist otherwise. That is, this is a unique university, and this is like a unique selling point to investors. But secondly, we tell you alum donations are going to be much more on our side naturally, because alums are going to donate more to these universities because they think it actually stands for what they were taught for. They think that it actually like stands for those beliefs and principles that they learned here. I think this is much better than O, because A, we give you logically prior analysis, that is, say a USP is logically prior to whatever they tell you. But secondly, we actually prove alum funding is still going to be much more on our paradigm, and like we respond to OG better. But secondly, on this entire idea of corporations funding you, I have two main responses. Firstly, I use OG analysis. Corporations have incentives to sell to minorities also. So they probably can go to these minority institutes and like fund these institutes so that, oh, we're like supporting these minority communities. But secondly, most corporations fund universities for research. That is to say, if they want some sort of a research report like that in their favor, they're going to fund these universities. Note, research is symmetric because it is never proven to me why, like, just because this university is very religious, they're not going to do science. We're not living in the Middle Ages. These guys probably do engage in like modern day physics also, because like religion is probably not that dogmatic. If you have a physics department, you probably do engage in some sort of science. Simple analysis that comes out of Hasan's speech. But secondly, most of these corporations just want results. They don't give a fuck about your scientific method. So if you're willing to give them like a research report that like fits their narrative or helps them sell more, they'll probably still fund you. This is very symmetric. Nothing that OG gives you stands. But on to their second push on multiculturalism, right? Note, you can probably still go to like a secular university, and like this push isn't like important at all. But what is exclusive on our side is firstly like the fact that a lot of these people simply can't go to school, right? If you belong from a very religious community, your parent is not going to send you to like college. The point at which like you're going to, no college exists that like actively imbibes your religious values. I think the weighing is like simple. We simply win it on depth, and like the fact that we have the most exclusive push, in the sense that we're the only side that can exclusively like help these people. But also on depth, we're like two reasons why. But because firstly, in our comparative, it is the only way where these people can go ahead and properly engage with their religion. Like on OG or like on Gov bench, them engaging with their religion probably looks like
POI.
you go to like other universities, what's likely to happen is they're likely to listen to other views about their religion, and like they're likely to feel bad about themselves because they don't know enough about their culture and internalize hate. But I think secondly, minorities or like religious minorities, if they're in like general universities, can't necessarily express their religion naturally because they are like discriminated against because of like perceptions that other people have. But thirdly, like on this entire push of censorship and not like free views not existing within these universities, we flip this. We tell you that this religion evolving is only possible through these universities. I think we give you two main reasons. We tell you that probably the point at which you're at a university, some level of like formal education is still happening, and you can probably develop some sort of critical thinking. But secondly, young people exist here. The point at which young people are actually going ahead and going to these universities, they're more likely to still have conversations in a safe manner, and they're still likely to be educated young people that come from like relatively privileged sections of these communities and have some sort of engagement that like helps the like religion
POI.
quickly take a POI.
I still have my parents, my family, my community, my church. Why do I need that religious environment in my college as well? At a point in time, that is coming at the cost of educational quality.
Cool. Thank you. I'll weigh against CG because this is the push that comes out at CG. CG tells us that like if you go to these general universities, you can like develop because you can interact with other religions. Note, this likelihood is never proven. That is to say that if I come from a particularly religious community, if I'm just simply put with like other people, it's just very less likely that I engage with them. Why? Two reasons why. Firstly, spaces. When you're probably surrounded by people like you, only then are you likely to talk like or engage in like discussion much more positively. But secondly, just a lack of discrimination. The point at which you're in these general universities, what's going to happen is all the other people are going to gang up on you. They're going to say, oh, you're from this community, this is such a backward community, etc., etc. You're probably not going to be able to engage freely or like just be as confident a person within these areas, or just like critically think, right? But I think then the push on CG is that like somehow people that come from disadvantaged, like some of the more vulnerable people in these communities can't go ahead and express themselves, like LGBT people. The simple like you can probably still go to a general university. The analysis they give for that is, oh, they love their parents. Like I'm unsure of this simply on scale. Note, LGBT people that probably go to these universities are going to be the more privileged of the LGBT people. That is to say, that they're probably the more educated ones, they're probably the richer ones. Note, you can never unlock the impacts for like the lesser privileged sections of these communities, or like the lesser privileged, like the poorer LGBT people. Naturally, you can only unlock that on our side, the point at which this religion is evolving. The religion can only evolve when there's safe spaces for this religion, when the people of this religion, if there is some sort of a space where they can evolve. Quickly weighing against O, we have much better mechanisms for taking down funding. We take down like corporations, corporation funding push from OG, which is like much more important. But secondly, we prove why alum funding is much more on our side. But secondly, our constructive is much more deeper in the sense that we tell you, they just simply say that like scholarships can exist from minorities only in their paradigm. We tell you why these scholarships are exclusively necessary. But secondly, we like have the biggest push in this debate, that is on like mobility for this religion, which like completely takes down anything that comes on Gov bench. We win this debate. Proud to pose.
Thank opposition whip for that fine speech. That brings us to the end of the debate. Thank all speakers for a beautiful round. I would ask my panelists to join the HBT in the room.